This is the soul behind the curtain, a safe space where you don't have to perform, where we explore what's real beneath the patterns, beneath the roles, beneath the masks, beneath who you've been programmed to be. I'm Lulu, and here we shed the layers and learn to accept our truth. Imagine that I gave you a time machine and I told you you could go back to the worst day or the best day of your life. The day your heart broke, the day someone left, the day you lost someone you loved, the day you got married, the day everything changed. Would you go? Most people say yes, but what if I told you you already travel through time every single day, every morning, every night, every time you replay a conversation that ended years ago, every time you imagine a future that hasn't happened, every time you tell yourself, if only, or what if? You're time traveling. Before we start an episode, I want to ask you a serious question. Where are you right now? No, not physically, mentally. Are you in 2017? Or are you replaying a conversation from 3 years ago? Are you imagining something that hasn't happened yet? Are you actually here? Most people don't suffer because of the present moment. They suffer because they spend the present reliving the past or rehearsing the future. The past isn't only something you remember, it's something you are continuously recreating. This is supported by psychology. The event doesn't change, but the emotional meaning attached to it can. There's a difference between physical time and psychological time. We experience both, but one is measured by clocks and the other by memory and imagination. Psychological time is the subjective internal experience of time passing. It can stretch, compress, or warp based on your emotions, your focus, and memories. Unlike linear objective clock time, it is driven by the mind's perception and allows us to mentally travel between the past, the present, and the future. When you are engaged, happy, or excited, time often feels like it flies by. But when you're bored, anxious, or in pain, time can slow to an agonizing crawl. Here's what psychology can confidently support. The past is fixed. The events themselves don't change. But our relationships to those events absolutely can change. Memory is not like replaying a video. Every time we retrieve a memory, our brain reconstructs it. Research suggests that memories can be updated before being stored again. That's one reason therapy, meaning making, and new emotional experiences can change how a past event feels, even though the event itself remains the same. Inside your brain is a special chemical called dopamine. Think of it like a gas pedal of your mind. When you're scared or super excited, your brain pumps out tons of dopamine. Your mind starts taking pictures super fast, like a slow motion camera. This makes a 5-second scary ride feel like it lasted for a whole minute. When you're bored, the pedal isn't being pushed, so your brain takes fewer pictures, making the actual clock feel like it's moving super slowly. Your memory works exactly like a box of Lego bricks. When something happens to you, your brain breaks that event down into separate pieces: a color, a sound, an emotion, or a smell, and it scatters them around. When you try to remember that event later, your brain has to quickly rebuild the Lego set from scratch. The rebuilding process is called memory reconstruction. And here's how it works. Sometimes, when your brain tries to rebuild a memory, it can't find all the original Lego bricks. Maybe it forgot what color shirt your friend was wearing or exactly what song was playing. Your brain hates leaving a Lego set unfinished. It will automatically grab a random brick from a different box, like a guess or something you saw on TV, and snap it into place. You will think it's a real memory, but your brain actually just made it up to fill the blank space. Because your brain rebuilds memories every single time you think about them, they can change based on who is asking you about them. If you saw a car tap another car, and someone asks, "How fast was the car going when it smashed into the other?" your brain gets strict. The word smashed makes your brain swap out the original tap Lego brick for a giant explosion brick. So the next time you remember it, you will truly believe you saw a huge car crash. Memory and gratitude share a deep neurological connection. Reflecting on being thankful stimulates brain regions responsible for memory and emotion. This practice triggers happy chemicals in the brain, such as dopamine and serotonin, which essentially train the brain to create a positive memory bias, helping us recall more joyful life events. Regular appreciation physically rewires our emotional circuits and supports our cognitive health as we age. By consciously anchoring ourselves in gratitude, we shift our brain's focus from what is missing to what is already present. Think of your memory like a giant photo album of your life. When you practice gratitude, you are choosing which photos get the biggest, brightest spots in the album. Looking for things to be thankful for changes how you remember the whole story. When you say thank you for a good moment, your mind puts a bright yellow highlight over it, which makes that specific memory stand out so it is much easier to find later. Your mind naturally worries about mistakes and bad days, but gratefulness acts like an eraser for that worry. It allows the bad memories to fade away while the good ones stay sharp. When you look for things to be glad about today, your mind automatically starts searching through yesterday's memory for hidden treasures you might have missed. The more you practice finding good things, the more your mind automatically saves happy memories. Over time, you start remembering your life as a happy adventure. By being thankful, you are training your mind to become an expert at remembering the best parts of your day. Gratitude changes attention. Attention changes experience. Experience changes behavior, and behavior changes life. Aside from psychological benefits, a lot of physical and mental benefits can come from practicing gratitude, such as improving our emotional regulation, having stronger social bonding, reducing the stress in our lives, having better sleep for a lot of people, and also having greater subjective well being. This also shifts attention. Your brain begins noticing resources instead of only threats. The thing is, gratitude does not deny your pain. It widens attention enough to notice that the pain isn't the only thing that's present. Your brain predicts reality. It doesn't simply observe it. Every second, your brain is making guesses. It's filling gaps. predicting, correcting, updating. Reality isn't passively received, it's actively constructed. If my brain is constantly predicting reality, what predictions have I been feeding it? What is uncertainty? Uncertainty is living in a future that hasn't happened yet. What's regret? It's living in a past that no longer exists. When we're stepping into uncertainty, of course, there's going to be activation. The present is the only place where your nervous system can regulate. Your choices can be made, your gratitude can be practiced, and your relationship with Allah can be lived. I would say that gratitude changes the brain. But a more accurate explanation would be that gratitude changes the observer. If the observer changes, doesn't the experience change too? Changing the present doesn't alter what happened. It alters the person who remembers what happened. And sometimes, that's the closest thing to changing the past we'll ever experience. Imagine watching the exact same movie when you're 6 years old, then again when you're 16, then again when you're 30. The movie never changed. You did. And because you changed, the meaning of the movie changed. Memories work in a surprisingly similar way. Perhaps healing isn't changing your history. Perhaps healing is changing the person who remembers it. The inner child. There's someone I visit often. She's 19. She doesn't know what's about to happen and still believes certain people will stay forever. She still thinks some dreams will unfold exactly as she had imagined. She still mistakes uncertainty for danger. Sometimes I wish I could go back and tell her everything. But then I wonder, if I did, would she become me? I don't actually want to save 19-year-old me. I want to thank her. She survived a lot. Enough. For me to become this woman, in this moment, recording this podcast. I realize that I have been unknowingly practicing a form of compassionate imagery of almost my entire life. This is a therapeutic approach that intentionally invites people to imagine comforting or wiser versions of themselves, speaking to younger parts of themselves. The fact that mine developed naturally as a child is remarkable. It's not something I'd present as evidence that literal time travel can occur, yet is an experience that has broadened my perspective of understanding me and what I really want. Here's something I never dreamed I'd speak about publicly before. When I was little, maybe 7 or 8 years old, whenever something happened that felt too big for me to carry, I had a ritual. I'd wait until I was alone in the house and walk into my bedroom. I'd sit on the floor in front of my closet, pull my knees up to my chest, wrap my arms around them, and I'd just wait. I loved movies about time travel growing up. Back to the Future was one of my favorites. Somewhere in my little mind, I became convinced that maybe one day, the adult version of me could come back and visit. So I closed my eyes and imagined she was standing in front of me. And I'd ask her questions. Did we make it? Are we okay? Do we ever stop crying? What do we become? What do we do for work? Are we happy? Did someone finally love us the way we deserve to be loved? Who do you marry? I remember constantly begging her to give me a clue. I'd ask her to at least tell me the first letter of his name. Just one letter. That's all I wanted. She never answered me out loud. It wasn't like hearing a voice in the room. It wasn't anything supernatural. It was more like a deep knowing. a warmth almost, like the feeling of someone putting a blanket over your shoulders when you're cold. The answers would simply appear in my mind, not as sentences I heard, but as reassurance I somehow felt. Every single conversation ended the same way. You're going to be okay. And somehow, that was enough to help me survive another day. I forgot about those conversations for years. Life happened, trauma happened, growing up happened. And then, during my own healing journey, something unexpected happened. Without even realizing it, I started doing the exact same thing again. Today, whenever something deeply triggers me, when I feel rejected, abandoned, unloved, ashamed, or overwhelmed, I close my eyes. Before I try to fix the emotion, I become curious about it. I ask myself, how old does this feeling feel? Not how old am I? How old is the feeling? And almost every time, an image appears. Sometimes she's 7, sometimes she's 12, and sometimes she's 16. Different ages carry different wounds. I don't force the image. I simply notice whichever version of me arrives first. Then, I imagine sitting beside her. I don't rush to make her stop crying. I don't tell her she's overreacting. I don't tell her to be grateful or try to calm her down. I simply sit with her first, because no one really sat with her back then. Then I ask her the same question every psychologist eventually learns to ask. What is it about this moment that's hurting you so much? Sometimes she tells me I'm scared. Sometimes she says I think everyone's gonna leave. Sometimes she doesn't answer with words at all and she just cries. And that's okay too. Instead of arguing with her, I answer as the adult she spent her childhood waiting for. I tell her, I know this feels unbearable, but I promise you we survive this. You grow up. You become a psychologist. You help people heal. You laugh again. You fall in love. You're safe now. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. Sometimes I even tell her details about our life today. I tell her about the home we live in. I tell her about the people who genuinely love us. I tell her that we no longer have to earn love by suffering. I tell her things she could have never imagined from where she was sitting on that bedroom floor. But something else started happening. On the hardest days, I realized I wasn't only looking backwards anymore. Sometimes I look forwards. When I feel exhausted, when I feel like healing is taking way too long, when I wonder if I'm ever gonna become the person I dream of becoming, I imagine another version of me, a more healed version of me, an older one, richer, wealthier, smarter, healthier, a wiser one. A version of me who has already walked through everything I'm currently afraid of. I imagine her sitting beside me, exactly the way I sit beside my inner child. She doesn't criticize me. She doesn't tell me I'm behind. She doesn't tell me to hurry up. She simply smiles, almost as if she's remembering what it felt like to be where I am today. And then she tells me, "Thank you. Thank you for carrying us this far. Thank you for being strong. I'll take it from here." Sometimes I wonder if I'm healing my past by borrowing hope from my future. Every conversation with your past, every conversation with your future happens in only one place, here, now. Your mind has the extraordinary ability to travel through time, but your brain has no choice but to live in the present. Think about this. Your breathing happens now. Your heartbeat happens now. Your muscles are contracting right now. There is no physiological experience of yesterday, only a present experience of remembering yesterday. Everything happens here. Your biology literally cannot exist anywhere else. Your mind can leave, but your body can't. The present moment is the only place where forgiveness can happen. You can't forgive yesterday, yesterday. You forgive yesterday, today. Quantum physics has inspired many philosophical conversations about reality and possibility. While we shouldn't assume that quantum effects directly explain human psychology, I think some of these ideas can serve as beautiful metaphors for how our perspective shapes our experience. I think the idea that Allah is beyond human constraints and our limited perception of time is a theological and philosophical discussion. It doesn't need quantum physics to be meaningful. It is already stated. Allah is not bound by time in the way that we are. He is much greater than that. We experience life sequentially. We experience it in relative time, while time with Allah is different and is absolute. We are called to trust what we cannot see yet. And that's why gratitude is repeatedly emphasized in the Quran as transformative. What if this moment could change your past? The past is a memory. The future is imagination. But gratitude is how we meet Allah in the only place we've ever truly been. Here, now. The past and the present and the future are already written. And this is my reflection as a Muslim. We're just experiencing them in relative time instead of absolute time. Letting go isn't something you do. Maybe it's somewhere you return. Because every time your mind leaves the present, it grabs something. A regret, a fear, a fantasy, a guilt, a resentment, a future. And maybe peace isn't found by solving every thought. Maybe it's found by gently bringing our attention back to Allah. The opposite of anxiety isn't confidence, it's presence. Anxiety almost always asks, what if? And presence asks, what is? This is so simple, yet incredibly deep. You know how Allah says not to despair of His mercy? Think about this psychologically. Despair is certainty. Hope is uncertainty. The hopeless person says, I know how this ends. The hopeful person says, Allah knows. I don't. I don't know where, but somewhere. Time doesn't heal. People heal. Time simply gives them opportunities to meet themselves differently. One reflection that brings me peace is that perhaps Allah, in all His wisdom and glory, did not reveal the unseen to us because living faithfully requires us to meet life one moment at a time. As Muslims, we're taught that the knowledge of the unseen belongs to Allah. We don't know when we'll die. We don't know exactly how tomorrow will unfold. We don't know every test or every blessing waiting for us. And perhaps there's mercy in that. Imagine if at the age of 18, someone handed you a book containing every moment of your life. Would you still fall in love so freely if you knew exactly how it ended? Would you laugh the same way if you knew tragedy was coming? Would you make dua with the same sincerity if you already knew every answer? Would you appreciate an ordinary Tuesday if you knew exactly how many Tuesdays you had left? Maybe certainty isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's a burden. Anxiety desperately wants certainty, but faith doesn't promise certainty. It teaches trust. Why doesn't Allah show me His plans? Maybe because if He did, you wouldn't need trust anymore. And trust is one of the deepest acts of worship. Not because you know, because you don't. The present is where our acts of worship happen, where our choices are made, where patience is practiced, where gratitude is expressed, and where trust in Allah is lived. We spend our entire lives praying, Ya Allah, just show me. Show me if they're the one. Show me if this business works. Show me if I'll heal. Show me when I'll die. Show me what happens. And Allah says no, not because He's withholding, because He's protecting. Imagine He showed you every dua that would eventually be answered. Would you ever learn patience? You know what else? The Quran repeatedly invites us to reflect on signs, not spoilers, signs. Think about that distinction. Allah gives us enough to trust Him, not enough to eliminate trust. And that is beautiful. If Allah had wanted you to know tomorrow, He would have created you there. Instead, He created you here. Maybe peace was never found in knowing what comes next. Maybe peace was always found in trusting the one who already does. Maybe athkar are called athkar because they remind us why we're here. In Arabic, we call these words athkar. Dhikr literally comes from the root meaning to remember, to mention, to recall, to bring something back into awareness. I've always found that fascinating because isn't that what we're constantly trying to do as human beings? Remember. Remember who we are, what matters. Remember that this life is temporary. Remember that Allah is with us. Remember that hardship isn't forever. Remember that our worth isn't determined by this one moment. I've often wondered whether one of the wisdoms behind dhikr is exactly that. Not because Allah forgets, but because we do. Psychology tells us that attention is limited. We cannot consciously attend to everything at once. Whatever we repeatedly bring our attention back to gradually becomes more accessible to our minds. If I spend all day rehearsing fear, fear becomes familiar. If I repeatedly rehearse gratitude, gratitude becomes easier to notice. If I repeatedly remember Allah, my perspective begins to change. As Muslims, we believe our souls existed before this worldly life. There are realities that belong to the unseen, and there is much we simply don't know. What I do know is that when I look at my own life, I notice how easy it is to forget. I forget blessings, I forget perspective. I forget patience, and I forget to trust. Perhaps that's one reason I return to dhikr so often. Not because Allah needs to be remembered, but because I need reminding. Maybe time travel isn't our greatest superpower. Maybe remembrance is. Think about it. When you remember Allah, where does your mind come? Back. When you become grateful, where does your mind come? Back. When you breathe, where does your mind come? Back. When you pray 5 times a day, what are you doing? Returning, 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 returning. It's almost like your day is punctuated by invitations to come home. We're put on this earth and we forget. Identity is not something we discover once. It's something we repeatedly remember. Think about that. No one wakes up one morning permanently courageous, or permanently grateful, or permanently patient. Those qualities are practiced, repeated, remembered, every day. Maybe that's why growth isn't one giant decision. It's thousands of tiny acts of remembering who you're trying to become. Maybe that's why I don't see healing as becoming someone new anymore. I see it as remembering someone I forgot. Maybe the opposite of forgetting isn't remembering, it's returning. Returning to the present, returning to your fitra, returning to gratitude, and returning to Allah. And mostly, returning to yourself. People say I miss who I used to be. What if you don't miss your past, but you miss how safe you felt before life taught you to be afraid? That's where the inner child comes in. Imagine your entire life as a giant museum. Every room is a different year. 1995, 1999, 2001, 2003. Some people spend their whole lives living inside one room, never realizing they're allowed to walk through the museum. Healing isn't burning the room down. It's realizing you were never trapped inside it. You were just visiting. If your body is here, but your mind is not, where have you been living? And maybe it's time for you to come home. Before this episode ends, don't think about yesterday. Don't think about tomorrow. Just notice where your mind went while listening to me. Did it visit someone? A memory? A regret? A dream? A fear? Or did it finally come home? Home isn't a place. It's the present moment. Thank you for stepping behind the curtain with me today. If this conversation resonated with you, share it with someone who's learning to trust the process of becoming. Until next time, keep questioning your patterns, keep embracing the truth, and keep listening to the soul beneath it all.